All right, guys, thanks very much for listening. Before we get into today's podcast, can I please ask that you subscribe to the YouTube channel below, and please make sure you like the video. The more likes we get on the video, the more people are likely to see it. So, this week on the podcast, we sit down with Scottish rugby royalty, Mr. Daniel Parks, to talk all things rugby, transitioning from playing to coaching, and we'll go into his career, his illustrious career over in Scotland, and how he's transitioning into being the Sydney Uni Colts coach. Awesome dude, great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
Mate, thanks for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. So before we start, we've only met a couple of times, but we've had some pretty good chats both those times. So I thought it'd be great to get you on and actually talk a little bit about your rugby career and the journey you had, because just as an example, we were at the cricket on Thursday and I posted a stupid video of me chewing gum on my Instagram page. You walked through the background for like 1 second. And from that video, I would have had 5 messages from people in Scotland going, "Is that Dan Parks?" So you've got almost these I don't want to say 2 lives, but you're from the Shire originally. Is that right?
No, not at all. I'm not from the Shire. I'm actually from a place called Dundas. For those Sydney siders will know or should know that, in basically between Parramatta and Ryde. That's where I grew up. And my brother, sister, and my mother all still live in that area.
Okay, so you're from Dundas originally, and then you've ended up somehow in Scotland playing a long international career. I was looking up some stuff online. You got all these records. You've been in 2 World Cups. You're the Scotland players player of one of the World Cups. And just, I thought it'd be great to get you on and talk about your journey from being a shoot shield player to working your way over to Europe, playing. How many tests did you play? Like 80, something like that, 70 or 80?
Chubby, I thought you just said you did research, mate. Clearly, that's not the case. Loose term. No, I was lucky to get 67 caps, mate, in the end.
I was close.
Yeah, you're close. Yeah, give or take. But yeah, man, 67, mate. I never thought I would, I guess get one. But to get given the opportunity was pretty unreal.
So let's start from Sydney. So you've come out of school. Did you play Australian schoolboys or anything like that? Or were you like one of those local junior sort of talents that people see, like a prodigy kind of thing? Let's start from the beginning and work our way till you get over to Scotland.
Yeah, so I played, you hear about fanatical fans. I was the ultimate fanatical rugby league fan as a kid. Fanatical rugby league in the winter and then cricket in the summer. That was me. And, mate, I was a Ricky Stewart tragic. So he was playing at Canberra. Obviously, I was right behind the Raiders in the late 80s, early 90s. Then the school I went to was just a public school, Marsden High at West Ryde. And when I first arrived, they'd had rugby in the school, but it wasn't like a big thing. There was no real great success. And luckily enough, the year I got there, I sort of obviously from year 7 up, just started to grow a reasonable team of athletes and sportsmen in cricket and rugby. And we ended up doing some really good things at the public school level, which was unreal. And I was playing from the age of under 15s and 16s. I played for Dundas Valley Vikings on the weekend, and that was my real first, opportunity or weekend rugby that I'd ever played in my life. I'd always only played rugby league, and then because I was playing it at school. To give you some idea, I didn't even know one player at the 1991 Rugby World Cup. So that's how little I knew about rugby. Obviously, since then, I've got to know a lot about rugby, a lot about the history of rugby, a lot about the conquering Wallaby team that won the 91 World Cup. But, as I said, I was a tragic leaguey, and just because I was at a school that played rugby, I started, I guess, playing it and then getting more and more into
it. So jumping from school to Colts or grade, what was your first club after you left school? Did you play shoot shield or did you play locally to start with?
No, so I left. I played for the Valley, as I said, up until 16. I left school. Actually, I think it might have been either 15s or I think it was 15s, 16s, and then I left school. I was young for my year, so I left in 1995. I was 17, and we were part of was called the Northern Suburbs competition, and basically you had Fort Street, Malvina, and they were and us. We were the main rugby schools, and West Harbour was our local. was our like shoot shield club. So all the players that were involved in those teams, St Pat Strathfield, back then it was more or less wherever you played, your junior schooling was where you went and played your club rugby. Do you know what I mean? Where that affiliation was. Whereas I know it's changed a lot now, but certainly back then that's how it was. So West Harbour was where I played my Colts. I played 96. I played the under-19s comp back then. I was involved in that team, and then the following year I played first grade Colts as a 19-year-old, and then the following year, 98 was my first year in grade. I went up, obviously, a couple of years, and I just wanted to give it a shot, and luckily enough, I started playing first grade after, I think it was round 3, I played my first game.
So what kind of era was that? Because the Shoot Shield has had a few iterations of, let's say, professionalism, for a lack of a better way of saying it. And I think in your era, it was pretty damn serious at that time. Roughly when was that, and who was coaching you at the time?
So we had some really, really good players in the competition. Basically, back then you had 3 provinces, and if you weren't playing Super Rugby, you were back playing with your club. It's not like it is now. You give a couple of weeks off, he's got to rest his shoulder. It wasn't like that. It was you. If you're available, you're playing for your club. Club was almost not more important than the Super, but very much up there. So the teams obviously back then, Eastwood were very strong. Randwick. Uni at that stage weren't strong when I first started, but it was the early 2000s they really started to rise. Some of the players, so Phil Wall was coming through, Chris Malone, Uni. Then you had, Randwick, Duncan McRae. The list goes on. There was plenty of good players. As I said, Eastwood, the Miller brothers, they were all there at that stage. Matty Mostyn was one of his last years there before he went over to Ireland. As I said, the whole comp was listed with real quality.
So I'm going to ask, because I know you do some commentary for Stan and have covered a lot of Shoot Shield games, and are now director of Colts for Sydney Uni. So we'll eventually get to your thoughts on where the state of the Shoot Shield is now in comparison to how it has been, because I'm really interested to get your take on it. But at what point did you get a sense that you could actually make a living out of the game? Or was it, at that point, was it just something for a little bit of extra money and some fun? And then from there, how did you make the jump over to Europe?
Yes, I think for me, I always wanted to be professional. Just as a kid, I wanted to be a professional cricketer, or leaguey or a rugby guy. But I was pretty realistic. As much as I wanted it, I also thought it'd be very hard to get there. I mentioned earlier on, 3 provinces made it hard. It was hard to get into the league circles unless you were a bit, as you said, a prodigy, like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old prodigy coming through. You'd be given that opportunity, but that wasn't me. So I really struggled. But the one thing I did have was desire, commitment to what I was trying to achieve. There was a lot of blokes as well around that, 18 to 21 period. They might have played, for example, New South Wales, 19s or 21s. And a lot of those guys, if the interest isn't there, for example, 100% with them, or a coach isn't giving them the love, they'll just give it up and they'll go and off to business interests or whatever. Whereas I was probably the opposite to that. I was like more a case of, well, no, screw you. I believe I'm better than that guy, and you're picking him, so I'm going to prove you wrong. That was sort of my attitude. Yeah. I obviously had some early success with West Harbour in 98. I think I figured quite high in the point scoring charts that year, and I think that's always been, I guess, something that I've been able to fall back on is my kicking abilities, my ability to score points, and as we all know, Chubby, you got to score points to win games. So that became valuable, and in oncoming years, Max Curry obviously saw that talent. He was at Southern Districts at the time, and he gave me an opportunity to come down and play with them in the year 2000. And I ended up staying there for 3 seasons, and then I played my last year at Eastern Suburbs. Scott Bowen was involved in the coaching staff there at the time. Mick Doyle, he was head coach, and they basically presented just what they were thinking, the way their philosophy around the game, and it sort of suited me. And I was at that stage, I was really actively looking overseas. I actually got an agent involved, and got it to about, we're now in 2003, and it got to about May, June. We were undefeated. Eastern Suburbs were undefeated that year. That was the first year, I think, of the Shoot Shield first 11 rounds, Chewy's New Cup, the second 11 rounds, and we were undefeated. We got into the last round. Funnily enough, it was to win the Shoot Shield. It was us and Manly. Manly had lost one game, and we were undefeated. And Yeah, and I got an offer to go to Glasgow Warriors. My agent at the time, he had spoken to, I basically said to him, listen, I'm ready to go, see what's out there. And, it was about 10 days. He came back and said, mate, I got this opportunity. Glasgow Warriors, you got Scottish ancestry, so you qualify for Scotland. What do you think? And I don't even think I think I came home and had a chat with my mum and my girlfriend at the time, and away we went, mate. Finished the season off and then left in September of 2003.
Did you end up winning that Shoot Shield?
Mate, we did. Yeah, we beat Manly. I don't think there's been a celebration quite like it at the East Clubhouse. But it was the old East Clubhouse too, the old trophy cabinet. We're on top of the trophy cabinet, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, still singing songs. And but yeah, mate, old school club rugby, what it's all about. It was, it was good times, man. And it was interesting because we went 11-0 in the shoot. And then we come to the Two Is New when all the super players are back and everyone else. And I think we won 3 from 11. So, yeah, sort of put it into context as in how strong the comp was when those super rugby players were back.
You told me a great story about when your first sort of gym or testing session when you became a professional player. Would you mind telling that story? And then maybe talk more broadly about learning to be a professional player, because you've told me that you weren't someone that was a natural sort of gym junkie and you had to learn the professionalism side of the game. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the only rule, I obviously did a little bit of gym, but, my first experience of going to the gym was with a good pal of mine, Grant Bowman, down at Southern Districts. Grant was a bit of a man about town. Everyone down at, I'm sure down the Shire knows G-Bo. And we'd go to Fitness First there on the corner there at Sylvania on a Thursday afternoon, rock in there about, 4:30. And we'd hardly lift a weight because every second person would come and talk to Grant and say good day, and we'd end up just talking the whole time. So didn't really do too many weights in those couple of years at South. Did a bit at East, but not a great deal. And yeah, so I arrived into Glasgow. They, I think I arrived on like a Monday or a Tuesday morning, whatever it was. And I think on the Wednesday, first day, I went in there. I arrived before round 3 of the comp that year. And so, yeah, they'd played 2 rounds, and actually the next game was they used to call them the Celtic Cup, which was the equivalent of an FA Cup style thing in football. So anyway, and the game was on the Sunday, I think. Anyway, on the Wednesday, we go to the gym, and I can't remember the guy's name, the fitness guy. He's like, right, we're going to do fitness testing, as in strength. So anyway, I was like, oh, okay. Never done that before, but I'll give it a shot. So literally laid down. I was 23 years old, mind you. Laid down on the bench. He goes, right, everyone, let's just warm up on 80. Let's just rep out 10, and then we'll get going into 3 rep max. So I get in there. 80's on top of me. I looked at it and I was like, I'm not even going to lift this off the bar. And for all these blokes, because that was early. That was about 6 years into professionalism by this point. So a lot of blokes have been, around that. And I honestly couldn't lift it off the bar. And it's my first day on the job. And obviously there's a bit of a, ruckus laughter going around, and so I'm a bit of a laughing stock in the gym. And anyway, so I think I lifted 75 kg for one. So that was my official number. And then, over the years, let's fast forward to my final year at Connacht. I think I lifted, my PB ever was like 117.5, and again, I know that's not much, but in comparison to where I started, you know what I mean?
It's a huge improvement.
Well, that was my journey, you know what I mean? So, I guess for me, getting to that level was something I was always proud of, but yeah, I wasn't really proud of where I started, to be fair.
Just on that, there's a number of questions there. So what was it like going from the eastern suburbs of Sydney to Glasgow in terms of, like, I could just imagine that would have been a huge shock to the system. Was that maybe your first time living overseas or going overseas on your own? And so you've got that, you're in a brand new culture, and you've just become a professional rugby player for the first time. Obviously, you've just done the fitness test, and I remember when I was at the Rebels trying to do chin-ups, and it was a similar kind of story, just completely embarrassing. Yeah. How did you react and evolve and learn from the culture change, and then trying to become a professional at the same time?
I think so. In regards to that, in 2001, I finished my second year with Southern Districts. On an individual level, I had quite an incredible year. I scored a hell of a lot of points. South, we finished really high up on the table. We lost out in the second week of the semis to Eastwood. As I said, Eastwood back in the day, Tim Donnelly, Paul Deneen, steering the ship back then. They were strong. But, I was full full of life. I got an opportunity to go to Leeds, the Leeds. I was going to say the Leeds Rhinos, not the Leeds. It was Leeds Tykes, and it was their first year up in the top grade. Phil Davies, ex-Welsh rugby player, ex-Welsh coaching legend. He had brought them up from fourth div all the way into the premiership, and so I played there for 3 months. Similar sort of thing, did a little bit of weights here and there, but again, it wasn't about that. I was there to cover. I was actually covering Brum Van Strutton. He wasn't arriving into Leeds until December. So they had a lot of 5'8" issues. So they needed someone to come basically join as almost cover. And I ended up playing, I think I was there for 12 games, started 10 of them, and I was involved with the other 2. So I had that, I guess, exposure to what it was all about. And then, so then going into the Glasgow setup, I think before I left, it was very much, let's not forget I signed in June and I was going in basically the middle of September. Excuse me. So I had that 2.5 months or whatever it was to get myself ready to understand what it is I wanted to achieve. And my focus was very much on, as I said, I believe I had something to offer. I think I thought my game would be really well suited to the way the game would be played over in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's more or less what I did. I think the first day of actual field training, that's what I really tried to implement on the team, was exactly what my strengths were, as in my boot and my general, I guess my communication, steering a team around the park. And that was clearly something that Glasgow needed at the time. And I found myself involved in the very first game. And as I said, we played the Celtic Warriors at Bridgend. We ended up winning that game. I came off the bench. And to me, it was like, wow, this is so cool. I remember even seeing things back then on the internet about how they were marketing the game. It was just stuff I hadn't really seen in Australia. And it was like, wow, this could be me for the next. Initially, I was like, this is me for the next 2 years. How good is my life going? And luckily, I spent 12 years over there.
Tell me about getting picked for Scotland for the first time.
What happened there was I mentioned I arrived in September. My pure focus was on playing with Glasgow, creating a good impression, being a good teammate to all the boys involved. So I went through that process. At the time when I pretty much got there, you can just imagine I've flown. The Scottish national team has flown the opposite direction. They were arriving into Australia for the 2003 World Cup, and I was jotting down in Glasgow to be a pro rugby player. At the time, Matt Williams was the coach. He was going to be the incoming coach of Scotland. He was at the World Cup in Australia, and I got a phone call from him, getting towards the back end of the tournament. And he basically sort of said, mate, looking forward to seeing how you go. I didn't know Matt from the borough, so I've never met him before in my life. Obviously knew who he was. He coached at Leinster, and he'd signed with Scotland, and basically rang me up out of the blue and sort of said, mate, this could be a real opportunity for you if you want to go down that path of playing at that next level. And I was like, wow, of course I am. I'm more than interested. And I think that was the first sort of realization in myself, wow, this could be something bigger than what I initially thought it was going to be. And then what happened was we had a camp. So the World Cup finished, and then I think we had a camp in, I'm going to say it was around Christmas time, maybe just before Christmas. And it really set the tone because the Six Nations starts early February. That was back in the day of foot and mouth over in the UK as well. So there was a lot of talk about how it would be interrupted, the Six Nations and everything else. I think foot and mouth was predominant 02, 03. So this was now 04. Anyway, so it was there was like a 35-man 40 squad, and then came back into another camp. I'm going to say it was obviously the week before we played. I think it was I think my first test might have been about the 14th of February. I think it was Valentine's Day. It was against Wales. And, it was a Sunday, and we're in Stirling. We used to train at a place called Stirling in Scotland, literally halfway between Glasgow and Edinburgh. And my name got announced as number 21, as in, basically standoff reserve. And, I almost fell off my chair. And I literally couldn't. And, so given an opportunity, and it was a really daunting experience, man. I'm actually going back, really reliving what it was like, because it was a real different culture at Scotland when I first arrived until when I finished. It was
in what way?
Oh, well, it wasn't. I think maybe I'm sure different teams are like this, but I found it to be reasonably cliquey when I first got there. There was a big Glasgow and Edinburgh contingent, and in particular for me, I was an Aussie. I was very new to the country. I was coming in. There might have been a bit of like, why is this guy deserving his place? What's he done to earn a spot so quickly? And at the time, I think there was only 2 or 3 other Glasgow players, which I even knew, which were part of that 2022 back. It was 22 back then. So I found myself we were staying in Newport at the beautiful Celtic Manor Resort. But I felt really isolated because, as I said, the cliquiness, and I was like, wow, this is not how I imagined it would be. And I think it was almost took me until I got that cap and, just, I guess, the effort levels and a few different things I did in the game to get a bit of, I guess, appreciation, a bit of respect from some of those other internationalists, especially the ones that were seasoned, that have been around the game for a bit longer. And fortunately enough, I eventually got my first start in the last game of that Six Nations, which was against Ireland at the old Lansdowne Road, and I got named players player for our team on that game. So I think that sort of once I got through that first campaign, I got 3 caps off the bench, and I got the last start. I sort of felt a sense of, okay, I now feel like I'm starting to be part of this. So I think initially it certainly didn't feel like that, and I reckon it was a tough, like it was quite difficult. I know it seems strange because you're like, well, how could it be like that? But I'm sure if there's listeners out there and they've been in a similar situation, be it, in a business sense or, going first day at school or whatever it may be, you're not alone there, because I certainly had that feeling at the highest level of rugby.
It definitely makes sense. And I think that's probably a generational thing as well, because I think now people are very, and this is just very general, people are very welcome and accepting now, but maybe back then it was, you need to earn your place kind of thing. Does that make sense? Tell me about the step. Tell me about the step up from Glasgow to Test rugby. What were the differences? Did anything surprise you? Was it seamless? Was it easy? Like, what are your memories of that transition?
So, I guess for me, speaking of pro rugby, in for example, when I got to Glasgow, what I found was when you play against Irish teams, quick game but very open. Generally open. The Irish would generally defend on a slide, which meant that, I'm sure you recognise, you could play with the ball, you could move the ball, but they always seemed to be in control of you defensively, but you could move the ball around. It was a fun game to be involved in. Again, Irish provinces. When you played against Welsh, it was a complete opposite. They had a real blitz defence going on. If you got to an edge, you just had no chance of moving the ball more than 2 passes. And their forwards were like what appeared to be 35-year-old, extremely angry big men. And they were always, they'd get away with everything back then, just cheating, so holding people back. They were the experts at doing really, really smart things off the ball. Referee, they'd, get away with a lot. And
the dark arts.
But it opened my eyes to so much. Like, I played with the great Peter Kay, right? But this was different. It was like he was one, at over there, all of them are doing it. And you're like, this is incredible. And you don't really realise it at the time. And then you watch video afterwards, you're like, gee whiz. And this is really before you even watched a lot of video. So that was a step up for me, that level. Not the pace of the games compared to Shoot Shield, but just all those little intricacies. And then once you go to the next level, obviously from going from professional rugby in the UK, it was back then, I'm trying to think of the name of the competition we played in. We ended up becoming the Magnus League, but at the time I can't quite recall. But going up to that next level, again, I mentioned my first game was against Wales. Iestyn Harris was involved, the league legend who ended up becoming a rugby legend with Wales. I think it might have been maybe his first cap as well. And I'll never forget Jason White, who was a wonderful back row, tackling back row, absolutely superb. He literally cut him in half right in front of me. It was the most incredible shot I've ever seen in my life. And Harris got up instantly, and nothing had ever happened. Now, this guy, if that was me, I don't think I'd be alive today, because he literally cut him in half and all his ribs would have been shattered. But he just bounced straight up. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is what the next level is. I'm in a bit of trouble here. And and the pace, it was at Millennium Stadium. The roof was closed. The bars was made. It was incredible. Imagine 22 blokes standing in the tightest circle you could ever imagine. Chris Patterson was our captain of the day. He's standing directly opposite me. He's 100 cap veteran for Scotland, screaming at the top of his lungs. I could not hear one word that was coming out of his mouth. I could just see, obviously, lips moving, because the noise and the volume of what the Welsh crowd were bringing was phenomenal. And obviously over the years at different grounds, you'd feel that. But I must say, for that first cap, that was really cool. As in that moment, it was unreal.
What's it like being you're an Australian and you're playing rugby for Scotland, which is your grandmother's country?
That's right. It's my mother. So it's my mother's father.
Yeah. So it's a place of ancestry. What is it like as an Australian playing for the national team of another country? Basically, and the rich culture that Scottish rugby has, and how serious it is. And did you get a sense of the history and the expectation? Like, what's it like coming from an outside place into the center of it? I probably asked that question terribly, but do you get the gist of what I'm trying to say?
I do. And I think the best way to answer that is I was very fortunate not to have a great idea of the history of Scottish rugby. So I think if I would have been coming into my first caps, I would have been probably overconsumed. I would have really put the heat on me and been like, wow, can I actually handle this? Do you know what I mean? I think for me coming, we're all a case of, oh, okay, well, I've gone from club to pro and now it just felt like that. And when I obviously was given the opportunity, unfortunately, I couldn't reach those heights in Australia. But when I was given that opportunity to represent Scotland, it was one of those things, grabbed it with both hands, like, this is wonderful. Can you imagine, me on playing at this level? It was, it sort of became, I guess, over the years, the next couple of years, my first World Cup was 2007 France. I reckon that's when it started to really become, possibly, I guess, a bit bigger than what I probably imagined. I know in the early days, we didn't have much success. So in particular, 05 and 06, more 04, 05, Scotland, we didn't do too well at the international stage. And we would absolutely cop it in the press, cop it like you would not believe. And it was quite confronting because I got to a point where I didn't read press. I used to love the press in Australia because back then press was positive. It was not like it is today. If you were good, let's celebrate how good you were. If you were bad, let's not even mention him because what's the point of talking about something that's negative? Now, man, that's just completely flipped. So I guess UK was ahead of its time because that's what they were doing to us as players. And, man, let me tell you, it's not a nice place. And what you end up becoming, you don't want to even talk to the journalists, the reporters, because why would you? Because all they're going to do is use whatever you say against you. And, and I must say, I came out the other side of that. That's what I'm saying. That 07 period for me, going into that World Cup, I think I really started to flourish and started to enjoy playing for that national team.
Tell me what it's like playing in a Rugby World Cup, because I could imagine that would be an amazing experience. What are your memories? You played in 2, is that right?
That's right, yeah. I was lucky enough to play France 07 and New Zealand 2011. So when I got selected, I'm a player, I used to be a player that I hated not playing. So if we had a squad of 30 blokes and I'm not in that 22, it would really upset me because I just don't like not playing. And fortunately, we had, more or less there was myself. I'm trying to think, 07. It was only myself and Chris Patterson that was selected as 10 options, as in a number 10, which I sort of thought, well, this is great. This means I'm pretty much going to be involved in every game. So I think they picked 3 halfbacks and they picked 2 10s rather than the other way around. Which meant that I was like, okay, well, this means I'm going to get some really good game time here. And I remember the first game we played, it was Romania. We played down, what am I talking about? Now, the first game was against Portugal. We played Portugal. Sorry, Romania was 11. We played Portugal in St Etienne, which is where we're based. And that's been my greatest ever experience on a rugby pitch, or pre-game, during game and after game, was that feeling of getting on the bus, driving through the main streets of St Etienne and looking either side of the bus, seeing pretty much every single human being that was there, watching half Scottish colours, half Portuguese on their faces. And to me, it was just that this is what a World Cup should be about. Literally a celebration of the game that we all love. And that's what it was. It was the game. We were celebrating our success on the field. We had a big win that day and we celebrated Portugal. Portugal scored a try and the crowd celebrated that more than us winning, if that makes sense. It was just such a full capacity, and that sort of embodied the whole experience of that World Cup for me. And my time in France for that, wherever it was, 4 weeks was, to me, I'd say my rugby highlight.
Can I ask you something that I've found very interesting doing these podcasts is well, like I was talking to Wayne Smith and I asked him, when you're trying things with the All Blacks, how did you know it would work, and weren't you afraid of fucking up? Because I would imagine that if you fuck up in the All Blacks, then the press would absolutely hammer you. And he said he didn't think like that, and they actually used failure as an opportunity to learn. And it's funny, I've talked to a lot of people about that, and it seems to me anyway that learning from adversity is actually one of the keys to succeeding. During your career, did you have any sort of moments, down moments or moments that, for lack of a better word, failure that you learned from and moved you on to greater success because of that?
Oh, I think in general, as I mentioned, we didn't have great success, especially with Scotland early days. It's an interesting one. I don't really know on a team perspective if that, there's obviously moments, but I can't really recall any particular moments. There was obviously moments in games where, as a kicker, that big things would come right down to the end, so you'd have to do a big kick at the end of matches. And I remember I was 15 years old and I was playing again for the Valley, and we had a kick against Beecroft at Parent Hills Park there. And for most, for myself or most kickers, I'd say it was, you should get it. And I missed it. And I'll never forget how demoralised I felt after that. And to me, that was always a massive learning, was about, mate, this is a big moment. If you want to be a kicker, you've got to really live up for these big moments, and actually, when you're given this opportunity, actually take it. And I've seen kickers over the years, and you hear different commentators, speak about that moment. This is his moment, blah, blah. Trust me, if you're that kicker and you're in that situation, if you're that hooker, you're 5 metres out, there's no time left. You're down by 4 points. You need to try. He has to nail that line out. They're the moments that you want to take on. That's what elevates you to that next level. If you want to embrace those moments. But it was, as I said, from such a young age, something like that happened to me, and I saw the look of disappointment and despair on my teammates and thought, I don't ever want to feel like that again. You know what I mean? Because I've essentially let the whole team down. We should have won that game on the back of my kick, but it's all come down to me and I missed it. I don't ever want to be in that position again.
It's funny that memory, considering all you've done in your career, that's the memory that sticks out to you. That's really interesting.
I've got a lot of things like that from when I was a little kid. Again, because I guess for me, I'd watch the big boys, as in back then it was league, and I'd watch a bit of rugby, but it was, you just watch different moments. Like, and it was just sort of one of those things that stuck in my head. As I said, I'm funny like that. I can remember things from when I was a very young age, and that was one of those things. And quite often I would think about that over time. And, I guess this is, slightly digressing. There was times where, I was having issues with my goal kicking, as in I might not be striking as well as I want, or I might be lifting my head or whatever it was. And, that's where, again, when you're part of a team, if you're an individual, it's very difficult to have that team aspect. So I would quite often speak to people I trusted in that team. I need you to keep an eye on what I'm doing here. So I want you to watch me, as in during a game, I need you to really watch what I'm doing with my head, what my left foot, plant foot's doing. I need to know this information because I feel as if it's slightly out. And you get that feedback during a game from a player who, you could trust, and you'd fix yourself during the game. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So as an individual, you wouldn't be able to fix it because you'd be like, who's going to help me? I'm struggling here. I don't know how to fix it because I can't see what's going on.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So live feedback basically during the game. Not something I've ever heard of before. I think hookers could probably use that as well. Talk to me about retiring, because I know a lot of guys who struggled with that transition from playing to retirement and being a civilian again and having to go and get a real job. What was how did that come about, and what was it like for you? Was it a seamless transition? Did you struggle with it? Talk me through that.
I think you mentioned the word seamless. I reckon you've got 2% in the rugby world or in the sporting world is a seamless transition. Very, very little have a seamless transition. I was playing at Connacht in 2014, and I signed with Connacht 2012. Eric Elwood was the coach at the time, and he signed me to a 2-year playing contract, and we'll review that halfway through your contract and see if you want to carry on playing or carry on going into a coaching role. And that was very much part of the reason why I went to Galway. Pat Lamb came on board after a year. Unfortunately, Eric left his post after that year and he moved into other things. Pat Lamb came on board and come, I think it was March of 2014. I was very up in the air about if I wanted to play. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But Pat said they weren't going to keep me on. So that was pretty much for me. I was like, okay, what are my options here? I can go potentially to Italy or France, where I absolutely loved going to play. I had a really great relationship with the Italian and the French fans. I don't know what it was, but they obviously enjoyed something about the way I played the game. And so I looked at that as a possible option, but not going too deep. And I eventually then I went back to Australia. So I came back, we finished, it was late May 2014, played a game against the Ospreys down at Swansea there. Had a big celebration with the players at Connacht. Obviously, they knew I was leaving. There's a lot of players leaving, blah, blah, blah. It's the same at the end of any year. Everyone, the blokes are leaving. It's obviously very emotional, the rest of it. I came back to Australia for 6 weeks, and I had to come back over to the UK for a wedding up in Belfast. And that's when I made the decision. I basically made the decision that I'd retire. And I guess as a player, you just think things will happen. I guess I sort of thought, well, I've got time. I'm in no hurry, but I didn't have anything necessarily on the table. I started doing a bit of work with Sky Sports in the UK. I was working in the rugby, so I was basically doing punditry. So before games, they had quite a lot of coverage. So I might have been getting maybe once every 3 weeks a gig where I'd have to travel somewhere, or I maybe travelled to Edinburgh. I was travelling back to Galway, down to London, wherever that may be. I also did a bit of the vet circuit. So I did Bermuda with the Classic Lions. That was wonderful that year, 2014. I did Hong Kong Sevens in 2015, and I did Dubai as well. So I was lucky enough to do all that, and then I actually moved back to Australia, May 2015. But if you puzzle it all up, when I came back to Australia, May 2015, I had nothing to go into. So I'd enjoyed that, I guess, that period of 8 or so months of not having, 9 months really, of not having, I'd been used to, as I said, for 11 years of being a pro footballer. So you're told what to eat, what to wear, when to get there, what time really to go to sleep, all this type of stuff. These are your days off. You're allowed to go have a beer then, all this type of stuff. And all of a sudden, you're free to do whatever you want. And for those that know me, know my, what I'm all about, and I enjoy a good time. So, it was difficult at times because, you can get a bit carried away because you're so used to someone telling you, you got to rein it in, so to speak. So I think for me, I probably struggled more the year after, if that makes sense. So I retired midway through 14, but my real, I guess my struggles were the following 18 months when I came back to Australia, that period from sort of June 15 to early 2017.
So how did you get out of that? Was it just a matter of finding work or finding, because I know you've done commentary. I know you were doing a bit of coaching for the Stars and then New South Wales Country with DC. Yeah. Was it just something that eventually fell into place, or was it something that you had to work for, or like how did that all come about?
Yeah, a bit of a combination, Chubby. I think Pete Playford was a bit of a saviour in many ways. Pete was coaching the Sydney Stars, or he was given the job, and I arrived back in Australia, as I said, late May that year of 2015, and I got a Facebook message from Pete Playford. Hadn't heard from Pete in years, basically saying, mate, because I'd written a little message saying I'm coming back to Sydney. He basically said, mate, I hear you come back to Australia. You want to do some coaching with me? And that was it. I was like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And that was, and then, I was lucky enough to be involved in that Sydney Stars team, which had a young Tom Robinson, a young Jake Gordon, who I've got to know really well. And, I love to see what he's done in the last couple of years. There's lots of these young kids who are coming through. At the time, we didn't know how far they'd go. And it's great to see them progress, and had some great times with DC over those, 16 and 17. And I guess, I met my partner Pauline at the start of 2016. And basically from then, we were together for a year or so. She got pregnant, and we ended up having a little beautiful baby girl, Scarlett. And I think it was that moment when she got pregnant, I was like, wow, okay, I've been a footy player for a long time, but now I've got to step into that new stage in my life as an adult, as a parent. I've got to get realistic here. And luckily enough, I was given an opportunity and in the business world, and I spent the last 3.5 odd years doing that until I've got back involved in rugby.
Okay, I want to talk about your coaching. So you had a bit of experience coaching before you jumped into your current role, which is director of Colts or head first grade coach for Sydney Uni. How has that transition been? Was there anything that surprised you about stepping into the uni job? Because I know they're an excellent program. They've got an excellent history of producing players. How have you attacked starting that job? And like, do you have a philosophy on coaching, or is it something that you're just working out as you go? Or how have you thought about attacking that job? Because it's a big job.
Basically, I got out of the. I decided that, I've been doing things in rugby, as in commentary, still involved in the game, little bits and pieces of, kicking, coaching, what have you. And I thought, what actually makes me happy? And the first answer to that is rugby, right? That's what makes me happy. So I needed to find my happiness again. Luckily enough, I had a good yarn with the main man, Darren Coleman, DC, and he just sort of guided me in a direction which he thought would be appropriate, and went down that avenue. That just so happened there was an opportunity, and had a good chat with Nick Ryan at Sydney University, and from there we sort of progressed the conversations along the way, and fortunately enough, I was offered the opportunity, so grabbed it with both hands, and I've been there now I started in November, so we're early into, I guess, the 2022 season. We've got a couple of weeks now of pre-season. It's going very, very well, it's in regards to philosophy, I obviously have different philosophies about the way the game's played. I'm not going to go too deep in sharing too much here, Chubby, but what I will say is that I'm very, very fortunate in the current program we've got at Sydney University. We've got Sean Hedger as our head coach of grade. He's been around the game for years. He's got lots of coaching experience overseas. Mark Bakewell's involved there. Brian Smith. There's a Damien Hill. There's an abundance of names. Nick Ryan himself has got a wonderful coaching resume. So I'm just really trying to feed off them as much as possible. Try and mix and match a lot of the things that I can take out of what they're doing, and some of my ideas as well, which I've thought about over the years when I watch games of rugby and certain teams, and I say to myself, oh, gosh, that'd be so different if they just did this differently, or if that team only adjusted slightly there. But you have all these thoughts. I'm sure we all do as rugby people, and we have those thoughts. And now I've got that opportunity to put my own stamp on it. I can't tell you how excited I am.
I can imagine, because like, just as an example, looking at some clubs, they have their style of play, and you often wonder, or I wonder anyway, if a new coach comes in, how difficult it's going to be to put their own stamp on it. So have you attacked the Sydney Uni job with the mindset of, I'm not going to change everything, but I'm just going to add my own flavour to it? Is that been your approach since starting the job?
Well, I think you have to. I don't think it's a case of, I don't think any coach is going to be like, all right, I'm just going to follow exactly what that guy's done because he's really good. I don't think you can do that, because you've got to be yourself. You can't just, you can't just copy off someone's notes. It's not the way I don't think, the game will work. And I don't think you'd be true to yourself. There's a reason why I've obviously been offered this role. I'd like to think it's my rugby intel and my certain ideas around the game. So, as I said, obviously there'll be things that we'll all adopt that will be very, very similar. But ultimately, I think as a coach, you've got to have your own spin on things.
Couldn't agree more. I've seen a number of coaches who try to replicate, coaches that they've had, and I just think players can see through that. So I'd certainly try and do that with myself, and it's good to hear that you're doing that as well. What about the human element of it? So you've gone from being in a professional environment, which I could imagine most of the guys would be highly motivated professionals. And I'm sure a lot of the uni guys, or most of them, probably are as well. But dealing with young men, even if they're incredibly motivated, there's still a human element that you have to deal with as a coach. Have you, I know you've only just started, but have you had much to do with the human side of things, and how have you found that, and how have you attacked that? Do you have a process for that?
I do have a process. At this stage, there hasn't been any, I guess, major, concerns or major issues around any of the players. But I make it's a real point to myself to really get to know the guys I'm working with. It's not just a job for me. It's not just a coaching gig to turn up and, all right, who have I got today? All right, I'm going to coach you blokes. It's not about that. It's about those men. I think once you're involved with any group of people, if you can have that connection with them, then they're going to play for you. That's what it's all about. I've had coaches in the past which I've thought, oh, here we go again. We're just going through the motions. And you don't feel it. You're more or less just playing in many ways for yourself. And maybe some of your mates around you. Whereas if you really connect with the team and your coach is connecting everyone together, then it's pretty clear if you're the odd man out. You know what I mean? You don't want to be that guy. So I think that's one of the biggest things I find, and I'm genuinely interested in people. I think that's why, for me, that's why I love rugby. First and foremost, I had a decision when I was 17 years old, rugby or cricket, and I chose rugby because of the people that were involved in the game. I found rugby to be a much more socially acceptable and fun group of guys. Now, I'm not saying I'm just saying that was my experience, and that's why I chose rugby. And not one day has gone by where I've ever thought, oh God, I wish I would have chosen the other option. Do you know what I mean? And I still think that's the case. And to this day, all the group of the young guys I'm meeting and getting to know more and more and more. That's what it's all about. Everyone, I believe everyone's got good in them. Every single human being has good in them. And to me, it's about bringing that out so we can all feel positive, real buzz and real good energy. And that's what, to me, is what sport and life is all about.
100%. I find the human element of coaching so interesting. And as you said, human beings are fundamentally good and interesting. And once you get to know people and they get to know you, that's how I believe you build a winning culture. Couple more questions, mate, and I'll let you go. I really, really appreciate your time. Just looking back over your career, you've had some pretty good coaches. Can you think of anything that you've come across that might have shaped your coaching, or things that you've seen from that guy that you're going to take and adopt? Is there anything that sort of stands out in the mind?
Oh, there's been numerous, tidbits, I think, along the way. I had, I was lucky enough to be coached by Daryl Gibson at one point in Glasgow. Daryl came up to Glasgow signed a 3-year contract, and he only ended up playing 1 year as a captain co-coach. And so Daryl was the backs coach. So I learned a lot from Daryl about his game, the way his game awareness, and just different things he would, because he was a 12, and different things he would get me to do as a 10, which I'd never been told before. And I found that extremely helpful. And obviously there's a lot of things, more so as a player, not necessarily as a coach, but as a player. I think when Frank Haddon got involved with Scotland Rugby, he had a real philosophy about how we play the game, about moving teams from side to side and really trying to open them up as best we possibly can. And I think he was that coach that came into Scotland when Scotland needed something different. And he was wonderful, I think, for the setup of Scotland. That was around the 2006-7 period. I think, to be honest, I think in Sydney, Max Curry was, he was really good for me. Max had a very, again, for the people that know Max, he's got a very unique way about him. But if you got to be, close to Max and part of what Max was about, then there's no better person to have in your corner. And, Max is still a friend to this day. We catch up, yearly, every once a year, and whenever we sort of can amongst there. But he's always a guy that I know, if I ever need advice on coaching or as you said before, the human element, he would have no qualms in having that conversation. So, as I said, I've taken different points all over, all over my playing career. And as I said, even now, some of the guys I'm working with, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a sensational sort of place to develop your own coaching and to learn to be a coach.
Totally.
Mate, I got to ask you about the Shoot Shield. Then I got a couple of rapid fire questions, and then I'll get you out of here, mate. You were obviously involved in the Shoot Shield at this sort of start of the professional era, or the mid of it, for a lack of a better way of saying it. And you've been commentating for at least last couple of years, was it?
Yeah, Chubby, I was commentating in 2014 when I retired in the UK, did bits and pieces. And then when I came back to Australia, funnily enough, I was speaking at a luncheon at Hunters Hill, and Gordon Bray was the MC. And anyway, Gordon then basically sort of said he was doing some work at the time for rugby.com.au, Australian rugby website. So I started doing some games with Gordon. That was back in, I'm going to say, 2016. And I've more or less been doing rugby commentary in different means ever since then.
So how do you view the Shoot Shield now compared to when you were playing? Has it improved? Has it progressed? Because as someone that's been involved in it for a long time, I can remember my first ever training session with South. Do you remember Les Motto?
Yes.
The old boxing coach? Complete maniac, but he got us on the line and said, just run for 40 minutes, guys, and we'll measure how far you go. Now every session is GPS, your high speed running's done, your loads monitored. You do hydration testing, which would have been unthinkable when I started playing. Right. As someone that's been involved in the game for a long period of time, how do you see the progression? How do you see it currently?
So wait a minute, let's go back to Les, all right, shall we? Just for a minute there. Yeah, Les. We used to do something similar. I think we just used to do three by 10 100-meter sprints. Then you do 10 right. On the 45 seconds. Doesn't matter how fast you do it, just do it. And, it wouldn't be pleasant. It'd be pretty boring, to be honest. But that's what we did. And, I think, it has evolved, the different fitness coaches over the time. It's quite fascinating. But in regards to the Shoot Shield, what I will say is it is a brand. It is a wonderful product. I went and watched I'm going to say it was a 17 grand final it was. Northern Suburbs and Warringah. And Warringah won that day. DC, that was his comp he won with Warringah. And, mate, I'm sure if you were there, it was like 20,000 people at North Sydney Oval. It was absolutely incredible. Like the vibe and the buzz and everything to do with it was just unreal. And that was I'd been at many games through my, 2015-16 involvement at West Harbour sporadically. And so I was watching games of rugby. But, yeah, to me, it's a different brand now. Back then, it was obviously when I was playing, it was a strong, very strong competition. But, you had some real slugfest games. It was really, a lot of them were really tight. Whereas now you're generally getting high-scoring games. It's all about entertainment. The ball flows. There's beautiful tries. Blah 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 blah. And mate, I got to be honest. I love being involved in it. As I said, once I was given the opportunity to get back involved at this level on a full-time level, sort of jumped at it. And I think it's a great breeding ground, mate. You'll see, yourself, the amount of professional competitions there are in world rugby at the moment, the amount of players that get taken from the shoot is just out of control. Yep. So you develop a player and you more or less, here you go, he's yours on a silver platter. Do you know what I mean? And that's the nature of the beast we're in, or the business we're in. But it's great because you get all this new talent coming through, educate them, and away off they can go and enjoy what professional rugby is.
I couldn't agree more. A lot of the sort of top tier Shoot Shield players who are maybe not quite super rugby players, they're playing MLR, they're playing Japan Top League, they're playing English Premiership, they're playing over in Europe. Yep. And I think that's going to happen more and more, and it's a testament to how strong the comp is. Couple of rapid fire, mate. I truly appreciate this. Who was the best player you ever played with or against?
Oh, man. I'm probably going to say Richie McCaw. Again, he just got away with so much, but he just did so much wonderful things. And again, it's probably weird for me to say it as he's a 7, but phenomenal.
Do you have a favourite coach?
Oh, I don't know. Again, I think the coaches I mentioned previous, I think they've, I didn't necessarily, throughout my professional career, I don't know if I necessarily had a really, really tight bond with a coach that I, for example, stay in touch with today. As I sort of mentioned some of those names earlier on. But I think on the professional, nothing quite like that. Certainly players, yes, I had some really close bonds with players.
Do you have a favourite touring destination?
Gold Coast.
Great answer.
And what I would say is holiday destination Dubai, but we twice I was on the Gold Coast. Once before the 11 World Cup, and in 2004 when we toured Australia. Mate, awesome, loved it.
So yes, wonderful place to visit. Did you listen to many podcasts or read many books or watch documentaries or anything like that?
Just The Wandering Bear.
Yeah. That's all you need, mate. Mate, looking back, as you look back, would you change anything? Would you change anything from the journey you've been on?
Oh, I'm not going to say I'd change anything on a rugby perspective. I think some of my life choices could have been slightly better. And I think if I would have had a bit more education on certain things, then my life might be different in certain ways. But I think overall, in regards to rugby, I don't think, for me, I think I was pretty blessed to achieve what I did with the talent I had. I made the most of, I guess, what you might call a God-given talent, and I really worked on that talent, and it progressed me into other areas which I never would have been able to do if I didn't play rugby.
That answer will probably tie into my last question. What advice would you give 18-year-old Daniel Parks?
Seek the right advice on things outside of rugby. I think it would be probably my best thing, and I think that's a very valid, and that's why I'm really excited for my current role. I think that's especially being involved with young men coming straight out of school, going on to that next stage in life, whether it be rugby, whether it be sport, whatever it may be in business, but just having a bit more nous about what's ahead.
Mate, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it, mate. It was awesome.
Good on you, Chubby. I enjoyed it too, mate. I hope the listeners do too.
No, mate, awesome. Are we playing Colts and Grade at the same ground this year? Because I've heard various things that might not happen.
Well, my understanding, again, from the conversations I had pre-Christmas, it was very much the case. It was going to be, so for example, it would be first grade, second grade, first grade Colts, third grade on the main pitch, and on the back pitch it would be, so it would be like obviously second. I think how it would go, whatever the format is, but it would be second Colts, third Colts, and fourth grade. Obviously, second Colts would have to be before. That'd be the first game on the day on the back pitch.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so I think they'll all marry it up. Might end up being that, for example, fourth grade is probably the last game, or third grade Colts might be the last game on the back pitch. But to my understanding, it is, yeah.
Sweet. Well, mate, I'll shout you a couple of beers when we play you guys. But I think we played twice this year, so
good.
Hopefully catch up. And mate, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day off, mate.
Good on you, man. Thanks, Shelby.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.